podcast. Today, we're discussing everybody's favorite fuzzy alien life form, ALF. Hey, Natalie.
Hey, Rebecca.
Welcome back to the show.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. It's been a minute.
First, I want to get some quick housekeeping out of the way before we start talking about ALF.
Okie dokies.
Even though I know, I usually save stuff to the end, but today we're just switching it up. Apple Podcasts has been archiving our old episodes on their app. So you can only go back to like the end of 2019 if you're on the Apple app. So if you want to find our older episodes like Happy Days, Quantum Leap, stuff like that, which are really good episodes, you can go to our website, tvtangents.podbean.com, and you can find all our older episodes.
So good.
Or we can just repeat them.
We could.
We could just do them again.
I've wanted to.
We can talk about some of those shows because sometimes I'm like, okay, did I watch all of Mary Tyler Moore? Should I watch it again?
Should I watch that again? I think the same thing. And early on, there were a couple times I didn't get to watch the whole series because of multiple reasons. And now I'm like, I feel like I should go back and watch that.
Something came up about Three's Company the other day, and I was like, did I watch Three's Company? I know we did an episode on it. Did I watch it?
I thought the same thing because it's on like Cozy TV or something in the mornings, and it came on the other day, and I was like, oh, and I'm like, man, I don't remember all of this episode. So I was like, dang.
I think our brains are too full. We have to like dump out information that we don't need.
Isn't that a new commercial on TV that you have? It's like delivery, some kind of it was a Super Bowl commercial with Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer.
Okay.
And she didn't remember him.
Aww.
And it was like, oh, in order to learn new things, you have to forget old stuff. And she's like, do we know each other? And he's like, we worked together 10 years. And so that's us.
That's adorable. That's absolutely me. Absolutely me. So let's get into ALF. ALF ran on NBC from September 1986 to March 1990. And it aired on Monday nights until the final season, where they moved it to like Saturdays and Sundays and whatever. Kind of flopped around. Yeah. And I searched the TV schedules for the time frame that it was on because I didn't watch this show at all. Like when it was on, I didn't watch it at all. I know my friend Lisa, who we bring up sometimes, who does your hair beautifully, she watched it. She was in my class in elementary school, and she would talk about it. And she's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you don't watch ALF. So I looked at the TV schedule to see what shows my family would have been watching instead of ALF. Because, of course, we didn't have all these streaming services. You just watched what was on TV.
What everyone wanted to watch on the one TV usually.
I think maybe my family just didn't watch prime time TV on Mondays because in its first season, ALF ran against MacGyver and Kate and Allie, which my mom loved Kate and Allie. So maybe she had control of the TV on Mondays.
Could be.
I don't know. And for a while, Newhart was all on the 7 o'clock spot. So my family definitely watched that. But did you watch ALF?
I watched ALF growing up, and I remember it. Well, I always think I remember things well. There are always episodes of shows that we watch that stick out to me that I remember forever. And or even just lines from a show. And then you start to watch it, and I get it. The perspective is also different. Things aren't the same level of funny when you're, 86 to 90. So I would have been like 9 to 11-ish in that time frame. That when you're 46. So going back and watching it, although there is a lot in here that it gets funnier over time. And I remember I was always like, oh my gosh, we have to watch ALF. And you were like, meh.
You did tell me to watch ALF.
Multiple times we're like, we're going to watch ALF. And I love ALF. And then I remembered why. But ALF is definitely one of those shows that you can just kind of watch. And it's a lot of the same stuff because you can only do so much with an alien that flew his spaceship into your garage, and then you just take him in as a member of the family for 4 years. So you can only do so much with that, but it is very funny at times.
Well, and Alf was like a whole phenomenon at the time. Even though I didn't watch it, I knew about it and everybody talked about it, especially because I was in middle school when it came out. And everybody talked about it. And there were stuffed Alfs everywhere. And it was a whole big thing. It was like very popular.
I asked my mom today. I was at my mom's house today. And I swear I had an Alf doll. I swear I did. And she doesn't remember, but of course, you know, her basement is full of all of our stuff from our childhood, pretty much. And she doesn't remember that. And I said, no, I swear I had one. And we were all laughing about it. And I was like, so you don't know where it is then? And I excited because I was going to show up with Alf if she knew where it was. And you'd have been like, oh my God, Alf is here.
Someone I know had the stuffed animal. I don't know who it was, but because I remember his snout and like the stitching on his snout. I very much remember that.
Yeah.
But I don't know who it was. I definitely didn't have it. We were not an Alf family. Yeah. This show doesn't have a fun theme song that we can sing.
No.
In fact, the theme song is like
do do do. No. Do 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 do. It's kind of that's probably not even it.
We got some generic music.
Yeah.
And so it's lacking in that department, but that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I like that the theme song changed about halfway through or so, or like the montage at the beginning. And I just love they're very like fake with it. Like the Alf has like a video camera and finds everyone, you know, and there's at the beginning like Lynn is in like she's hiding, she's on the phone and she over exaggerates because you can't hear any noise and she's like Alf and she's a ha 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 and closes the door or whatever. And yeah, everybody, even Brian, hi Alf. And so it's all overly like dramatized. And so it's kind of funny, but you're right. No good song we can sing.
And the fun thing about new seasons on TV when we were kids was to see how they were going to change up the opening sequence and the, you know, the stuff that they showed in the opening sequence. How that's going to be. That was always really cool.
Yeah.
Because then they put clips from the last season in there. And that was fun.
Yeah.
ALF is an acronym for alien life form, but his real name is Gordon Shumway. Gordon's spaceship from Melmac crash landed in the garage of the Tanner family. And even someone who didn't watch ALF growing up knew that he was from Melmac and that his name was Gordon. I think I did watch the cartoon, actually. Later on, there was a Saturday morning cartoon.
That's right. I forgot there was a cartoon after the fact. Yeah, the biggest thing I always took away from just remembering Alf as I was growing up was that he was an alien but spoke English. He kind of looks like an anteater / dog, but it walks upright. Alf also has a specific walk. We'll get into like how the characters played as for the show, but I remember in high school, I don't remember who it was, but we knew somebody and we're like, that person walks like Alf. And so we were joking because it's kind of like a bounce because, you know, you have to play it up. It's a person playing the character, but a lot of times I'm sure they're just moving, you know, it's like a puppet basically. And so we used to do that, make fun of people if they walked like Alf and bounce up and down. And I really can't remember.
I'm just thinking of this. I'm picturing high school Natalie turning to her friend being like, oh my God, freaking Alf walking dude.
It's so true. And my favorite is I feel like we were describing that on a road trip one time that I took with a friend of mine. And my sister Michelle was in the car behind us. And when we stopped somewhere, we were talking about it. And she goes, I could see you guys bobbing your head. So I knew that's what you were talking about. Oh my God. So that was like the best part. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And also facial expressions of the Alf is just, you know, he gets like shocked and sometimes his ears go back and he does like certain things. And so Those are always, like, little things that I would remember.
Oh, I'm dead. I'm dying. I'm just yeah.
I love that.
Riding in a car behind Natalie and a friend and watching their animated conversations is an experience everyone should have at some
Yes,
point.
you would know. I mean, I'm very animated speaker, so that is how that works.
Oh, okay. So obviously Alf is a puppet.
Mhm.
There's not a real alien in the
Right.
show.
Correct.
And in order to keep the real Alf looking nice, most of the rehearsals they used an early prototype named Ralph, which stands for Rehearsal Alien Life Form.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes though the puppeteer just would use his hand because
Mm.
he didn't like rehearsing, so he'd just stick his hand up there and they'd have to talk to his hand.
I love that.
And I was reading like a very long People magazine article about how absolutely everyone, hated working with this puppet because it took forever.
Oh, I
There
bet.
were like mechanics involved,
Mhm.
and like a half-hour episode could take like 12 hours to film because they couldn't get the puppet to work right.
Mhm.
Things weren't working, like his ears and stuff were like mechanical and they just weren't working right. And so everyone was just on edge all the time on this show.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was always wondering, of course, as a kid, I'm sure I didn't think, like, how does all that work? But again, going kind of back to the walk and everything, that's why I was always like, well, the reason it's doing that is because it's a puppet.
Mhm.
And maybe you only every once in a while you see Alf's full body in the show.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, and to be honest, I did not read through this, but I feel like they did have someone who had to put that on.
They did actually. Alf the puppet was played by puppeteer Paul Fusco.
Yeah.
He helped create the show. He created the character of Alf.
Mhm.
And it was also created by Tom Patchett. But full-bodied Alf was played by Michu Mazzaros, and he was 2 feet 9 inches tall. He was never credited in the series. He was also in a Pepsi commercial with Michael Jackson in 1992, and he was a stunt baby in Look Who's Talking in
Oh.
1989. And there's a street in Hawthorne, California, where he lived that's named in his honor, Me Too Lane. It's the shortest street in the city. How rude is that?
Oh
I
my
mean, he was
gosh.
still alive when they named it after him, but
Oh, goodness.
so he had a say in it, but yeah.
Oh my god, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I always thought that, and I always wondered and knew that it was more so, yeah, that they've got some kind of puppet, but yeah, played a few times where you get to see the full body, and it is kind of funny to watch him run around when he's like the full little.
It kinda freaks you out, like, when you see a whole Muppet. That's
Mhm.
weird.
It is weird. It is weird.
It's like,
'Cause
what
yeah,
are
you're
those
used to,
legs?
again, yeah, somebody's hand being in there and playing this
Right.
Muppet. Yes.
I started watching the show. I was like, "What in the world is going on?" It's a great family show,
Mhm.
but it's a little weird. I feel like the jokes there are some wildly funny jokes.
Yeah.
It's like they had a person or some people who were in charge of the jokes,
Yeah.
and then they had people who were in charge of the plot. And I don't think those people were on the same level.
No.
It was very disjointed,
Mhm.
very funny jokes. Plot was kinda like, "Huh?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot that went on, in Alf's story, of course, he's an alien, so on Melmac, they eat cats,
Mhm.
like, that's regular, so the Tanner family has a cat named Lucky, and so there's always that early on about, making sure Alf's not going to do anything to Lucky and all of these different things, but it's kinda funny because it's like and again, he speaks English, he's semi-normal, and in the beginning, I was kind of like, "Oh, I thought this was funnier," and then he becomes funnier, like, the
Mhm.
jokes definitely become funnier, but there's not a whole lot that goes on. The kids get older, Kate has another baby, but there isn't a whole lot of, there's nothing that you have to really watch the next episode for. There's
Yeah,
no
nothing
no
changes.
storyline to go. We do a lot of sitcoms, of course, and there are a lot of sitcoms that are like that, but there's no ongoing story. I mean, of all, my favorite sitcom of all time, there's no Ross and Rachel story that you're
Mhm.
following, or as things go along. So it's great in that way because it's definitely a just an escape from reality show to watch that gets funny over time. The family that lives next door is Mr. and Mrs. Achmonic. So no one knows about Alf except for the Tanner family. So like they don't want anyone to see him. He has to hide all the time, all the things. Well, there's an episode where he ends up like, I don't know if it's because of the moon or something. They have to lock him in a cage.
That happens a couple times.
Yeah. But one time they send the cat over to the Achmonic's house and its name is Lucky. Mm-hmm. And because to be like, hey, we need you to watch the cat. I can't remember what excuse they came up with so that Alf wouldn't eat Lucky. Well, Willie goes over to the house because I think Alf makes it over there and is trying to find Lucky, of course. And Willie shows up. Willie Tanner is the dad. And Mrs. Achmonic comes down and then they both come down and they're like, what are you doing here? And of course he says, well, I came over here hoping to get Lucky. And as a child, I remembered that, which is also one of those weird things where you're like, so that was one of the lines I for sure remembered. And then I do know, because I will remember this forever, the asparagus song. Did you see the episode?
I didn't see the asparagus song.
I can't believe that. There's an episode where little Brian and his friend have to be asparagus in a school play. And Willie writes like the song. And it's asparagus, asparagus, you put it on your table. Asparagus, asparagus, it makes you feel more able. And I have remembered that from the beginning of time when I first saw it.
That is wonderful.
So anytime anyone orders asparagus or I see asparagus, I have to sing that song.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
If you started singing that to me and I had never watched Alf, I would have been like, are you insane?
You'd be like, did you just make that up? That was kind of cool.
Do you write songs now?
You're like, what is going on? So yes, those are things that stuck out to me that I remembered.
Well, one of the first episodes that I watched that told me, oh yeah, this is a really funny show, and I do see why people like it. Alf gets thrown into the pound. And this spoiled little girl comes in with her dad because she wants to get a dog and she's all loudmouthed. And this girl was a great actor, by the way. She's hilarious. And she points at Alf and she asks what kind of monstrosity he is. And the guy says, that's a dog. And she says, well, gas it. Nobody's going to want it. Like, okay, this show is good.
Exactly.
It's stuff like that. Like, it's a weird premise, but there's funny lines all over the place.
Right.
And a lot of adult funny lines.
A lot of adult funny lines. Alf wanted a BLT, a bacon, lucky, and tomato sandwich. So little funny, like corny things like that. But I'm not going to lie. The one that I literally was probably like crying, laughing about. I think Kate goes back to work, or something at one point. Anyway, Willie's trying to cook dinner. And there's like salad. And Alf is like, what is this? This is leaves. And Willie goes, it's radicchio. And Alf says, well, I think it's radicchio that you're trying to cook by yourself. And the way he said it was just hilarious. And I'm like, there were certain days where I'm like, this is really, really funny.
It is really funny. You have to dig for it.
Yeah.
But it's really funny.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of familiar faces on the show as well, such as Meshach Taylor from Designing Women was an FBI agent in season 1 when Alf called Air Force One and talked about bombs. And then Meshach Taylor shows up and that was great. Yes. And we had the cast of Gilligan's Island.
Yes.
I loved that episode.
That was great.
I would say that was my favorite episode.
Yeah.
Alf built a lagoon in the backyard and then he dreamed he was on Gilligan's Island. Skipper and Gilligan and Marianne and the professor were there. And they were watching a show about the Tanner family. So they were watching Alf on the island. That night, because I must have watched it late at night, I don't know. I dreamed about that episode that I was on Gilligan's Island with Alf that night. I must have watched way too many. You know when you watch way too many episodes in a day?
Yeah.
And then it's just in your dreams.
Yep, that happens a lot.
And then the neighbor kid, little, what's his name?
Yes.
He falls in love with Becca from Son-in-Law. So he and, I don't her son-in-law in the movie?
Yes.
So Becca,
oh my gosh.
he's in love
Oh
with
my
her.
gosh. Yes.
And Alf and he do the Cyrano de Bergerac thing outside the window.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's another episode that I kind of remembered too. Like I just like barely remembered it, but I was like, when I saw the Cyrano thing, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember that. And yeah, for the life of me, I sure didn't write that down. Whatever his name is, he's the nephew of
Is he the nephew?
Achmonix. Yeah,
I
and
don't
he
know.
comes and he gets to see Alf at one point, and then he just becomes. Then he gets to just come over all the time because he's not going to tell anyone, and he knows it's a secret, so he gets to come. So that's the big thing. Like again, no one can know. The Achmonix come over to the house. They're always like, Alf, go hide in the kitchen, or he goes somewhere. But my favorite was Alf like threw a Halloween party so that he could walk around amongst people like it was nothing. And then he did. And the Tanners were all like, they see him and he's out at the Halloween party. And people are like, they think he's just in a costume. And so the Tanner's like, oh, I guess this kind of works.
He did the same thing. That's fine.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to figure out how there was the Christmas special where Alf ended up like with some donated toys. So he pretends to be a stuffed animal. And I mean, there's like a dying girl in a hospital. And so then again, he talks to her for real because she's dying. And he's like, and it was a weird, and I can't really remember the whole premise now. It was a while ago when I watched that. But then after that, I was also like, why doesn't he pretend to be a stuffed animal all the time when anybody would almost find him?
Do the Toy Story thing.
Yeah.
Just phrase.
So I literally was like, okay, there's a lot of stuff here where you're like, all right, this has got to be, they have to have plot holes like that so that it can be funny or like, oh gosh, what's going to happen if someone finds him?
Yeah.
So yeah.
You can't make it too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, later in the series, the Tanners welcomed a new baby. Unlike some shows where they bring on a new baby because they need to replace younger kids, Alf's writers did this because Anne Sheedon was actually pregnant IRL, which is cool. They didn't hide her behind pillows and stuff.
Yep. Every time I see it, this is my new thing too. When we watch shows, I always have to find out. I'm like, well, when did that person have children? And then I look it up to see, because sometimes they hide it. So, we've watched many an episode of things where they try to hide pregnancies. So yeah, this one right away, I was like, oh, I'm going to have a baby. And I'm like, oh, that seems a strange thing to bring on all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, she was pregnant in real life. Okay. Yeah.
Especially when the star of the show is a puppet.
Right.
You don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kate and Willie, that's the mom and dad in the show, they met in college in the late 60s. They went to Woodstock together. We get to see a home movie of them at Woodstock. Which was hilarious.
It's awesome.
And Willie is a social worker, and he's really into shortwave radios and trains and stuff. And that's how they met Alf. That's how Alf got there in the first place. And is it correct that his planet exploded or something? Was that and but then in the end they come get him?
So it was destroyed, and then he thinks that I feel like it was explained at one point that people, aliens such as himself and others probably got sent all around different places.
Yeah.
So again, since Melmac is also a planet we didn't know about, there's probably other planets where some of the aliens ended up and were living with families for 4 years. You never know.
Yeah. Because he found his cousin one time.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be just like some sideshow people trying to
tried to kidnap him up too.
Yeah, they were passing off like a dog as an alien or something.
Yeah. And I do like when he was he wasn't really dating, but he found a friend and she's blind. And so then he went to her apartment, and I just love it. And it's like she had no idea what he looked like and everything. And then she'd be like, oh, you're really short or something because she can hear where his voice is coming from. And then I think at one point she tried to shake his hand and was like, because it's all furry. I was like, how is this? And I can't even remember how all that, because she showed up later when they were trying to do something. I don't even know. He was having a party. I think he was feeling sorry for himself or something. And anybody who could be around, because later Willie's brother, the guy from Too Close for Comfort shows up.
Jay Bullock.
Yes.
And I was gonna say the guy from Hollywood Squares.
Oh, well, there you go. And as well as Kate's mom. So these are all people who got to see Alf, and then he becomes like they're part of the circle of people who know him. So there was an episode, if I remember, and I didn't even write this down, but that just reminded me, is where he's like feeling because he can't ever go out. And he's like, so he's feeling like trapped in different things. And then super depressed or whatever. So that was the episode where they brought all these people in. And I feel like at one point there's some kind of like therapist that's also in on this who gets to see Alf. So they all show up and kind of have like it's more of like a, oh my gosh, we love you intervention. Like, don't be depressed. Here's all the people. So her mom, and then the kid next door whose name we can't remember. And
I don't even think I looked him up.
You know what?
Because he was in like teen magazines when we were kids.
And I 100% wanted him to be the guy from Doogie Howser.
Oh, yeah.
That's who I wanted him to be. And I looked him
up right now because I actually have a computer on my phone.
Okay. Jake is his name. Oh, in case you're wondering, Josh Blake, I printed out a sheet of paper. I just didn't read it.
You did? Josh Blake.
Josh Blake.
Oh, my goodness. What was he in?
Oh, and then here's also the blind woman who Alf befriended. Her name was Jody, and played by Andrea Covell. Yes, I need to know what Josh Blake was in.
I'm not seeing him being in anything that I would have.
I feel like when I looked him up too, it was like there was hardly any information. Like no Wikipedia, just IMDb or something like that.
He must have quit acting it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, nothing that I can find. Because, oh my gosh, he looks so familiar. I swear he was in the magazines and stuff.
100%. That's why I'm like, when I saw him, I go, oh, what else has this guy been in? I tend to do that on a lot of old stuff that we watch, and the person is really not in anything. And I'm like, how is that possible? I'm like, did we live a different life together? Because that's interesting.
We probably were on a different timeline together.
I think so. Well, I know that for a fact. But anyway, I digress.
I want to hear about that.
I digress. Lucky, the Tanner family cat, his existence became somewhat precarious. They said like that, and he died in an episode and got replaced with Lucky too. And I'm like, do I remember that happening? So now I'm kind of all confused. But
why would they kill him and then bring him back?
Well, and actually I'm thinking like, does that mean that the real cat the cat in real life died?
Yeah.
But it doesn't really say it that way. So I'm kind of like interested. But yeah. So I did like that they ended up kind of bringing more people into a circle of people who could know about Alf, because
otherwise it gets stale.
Yeah, it would have. I mean, if he was just in the four walls of the house, that wouldn't have worked out. Yeah. So I'm glad other people got involved, and he did escape at times, and he definitely stole Willie's car a few times and has wrecked it, and then took off and did things. And at one point, he was like he became what was he? He was like an insurance salesman named Wayne Schlegel. And I think that's when he hit his head and got amnesia, and he thought he was an insurance salesman. And Judy Landers was in that episode, and she was like a secretary having an affair with him. So yeah, he was like thinking he was, and he had no idea he was an alien. And so of course he thought he was like all important, so he would take off, and they were afraid they were going to lose him, and it was crazy.
Have a sitcom without a hit on the head for amnesia.
I think you're right.
I think it's actually required.
Pretty much it's required because every show ever that happens.
Well, before we talk about the end of this series, let's talk about the cast, shall we? So, Anne,
I don't understand.
Siri. Oh, Siri, they're talking to you.
Talking to you. Okay, bye.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. Anne Phelan played Kate Tanner, the matriarch of the family. And she was 37 when the show started. Max Wright, who played her husband, was 43. And she had many single episode parts on TV shows before Alf. Her recurring TV roles included Emergency and Marcus Welby, MD, in the 70s. 5 episodes of Three's Company. That's probably why I was thinking about Three's Company. And she's been married to her husband, Christopher Barrett, since 1982.
Wow.
And they have 1 daughter. Huh. And the mom was, ex-hippie, kind of, she was cool. Yeah. No complaints about mom.
She did not like Alf. To say, she of course liked Alf. She was of all the people in the family, it was angst between the two of them for sure. And so that's why, again, we'll talk about the end, but there was never any, I mean, it was always like, Kate doesn't like me. And I mean, there was mutual because she cared whether something happened to him or if he got out, did whatever. They didn't know if somebody was coming over, whatever. But that was the thing. Willie was like his best friend. And the kids were the kids, of course. They literally treated him like a brother.
Because Willie didn't have to clean up after him.
Well, that's true. And that's the other thing is Kate, definitely was like, there's an alien in my house who does, I mean, and he destroyed a lot of things. So she kind of had a reason to be.
I wouldn't let him live in my house.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely
but
not.
She's great. She's such a great actress too. So, loved that. And I don't remember, I mean, to be honest, I don't remember seeing her in anything ever before. Max Wright's been in a few things, of course, that I've seen, but yeah.
I've never seen Max Wright. Other than, I think he was on some WKRP in Cincinnati episodes.
Okay.
It's probably the only thing I remember.
Maybe the only thing I really remember from him is Friends. Besides
That's
Alf,
right. He
of
was
course.
on Friends.
Yeah. He's Terry, who owns the Central Park.
That's right.
Yes.
According to a 2000 People magazine article that I mentioned earlier, Max Wright, who played Willie, hated playing opposite an inanimate object because he was like a stage actor. And so he hated this part. He hated being there. The puppet had a lot of technical issues and it ate up a lot of working hours. And he said the puppet got all the good lines, which is true. Everybody else was the straight person and Alf got all the funny lines.
Yeah.
Anshin had said that as soon as the final episode was finished, he walked off the set and drove away in his car without a word.
Oh.
And even though they didn't actually technically know it was the last episode at that time, but still, he just left. They knew it was the end of the season. He just left, didn't come back. He was diagnosed with lymphoma in 1995, and he passed away in 2019 at 75.
That's interesting because, I just read over some stuff that I saw too that said that he physically attacked Alf and the producers had to pull him off at one point. Yeah. But to add into that, I saw part of that. I was like, did I read something about
I'd like to see those outtakes.
That's what I'm saying.
Him attacking a puppet.
Yeah. She said, that it was just kind of a mess. It kind of shows me what great actors people really are because he also delivered I mean, sometimes his lines weren't so funny, but Alf would say something like, trying to be like, let's just say this happened. And Willie's with, what? Why? What did you do? Like, just his deadpan, you could just tell. And I mean, I thought that was great.
Funny.
He really was funny. But you're right. Alf did
one-liners were Alf. But Willie was funny in his reaction to Alf. And yes, I'm glad that I didn't find out all this information until after I watched the show.
Me too.
Because then when you go back and watch the show, it puts a different spin on it. But they all were doing a great job. And I even thought that in the beginning, before I knew this, like, they're doing a really good job playing opposite a puppet.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't know that. I don't like hearing that it's like finding out that two coworkers hated each other and they end up like as a couple or something, or they're best friends. And you're like, wait, what? So I guess my big thing with that too is, to be so upset. So I get it, having a problem playing against a puppet and having that kind of issue. But if you're like upset because the puppet gets all the lines, the name of the show is Alf.
Yeah.
Like, not gonna lie. But
Alf is the whole thing.
Exactly.
And not to disparage the cast, but Alf could have been anywhere. It's still about Alf.
Right.
It's not so much about the family.
He could have been going place to place and it would have just with new people all the time. And it would have been,
as we find out in the movie after the series. So the oldest child, Lynn, is played by Andrea Elson. She and Alf were very close. Meaning the character, not she and the puppet.
She and the puppet.
In real life, she was close with her castmates who played her mom and her brother. Andrea met her husband, Scott Hopper, on the set where he was a production assistant.
Oh,
and they married in 1993. And as far as I know, they're still married.
Very nice.
And she also said that there was always tension on the set because of the puppet. So she and she and Ann Sheedon would kind of hide away in Ann's trailer or whatever and get away from the puppet.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I did read too that Andrea Elson suffered from bulimia
later in the series.
During that thing. And she was great too. And I remember she's in an episode of Who's the Boss? Because of course when I saw her when we did Who's the Boss, I was like, oh, that's the girl from Alf, and that's, Max Wright will always be Willie Tanner, to be honest. Like when I first saw him on Friends, I was like, oh, that's Willie. They definitely stand out for stuff that where if they were in other things, I would think of them as being from Alf. So I'm glad that,
When I say I hadn't seen Alf, I mean, I hadn't seen 1 second of Alf, like not 1 second.
Yeah.
And so none of these people were familiar to me if I saw them in anything else. So if I saw her in Who's the Boss, didn't know it. Wouldn't have recognized her from anyone.
And that's funny because that must mean I definitely watched enough of Alf growing up. I'm sure we watched it each time it was on. It's hard to remember some of it, but yeah, we definitely watched most of it.
Then we have Benji Gregory, who plays Brian. And he was born into an acting family in 1978. And he was 8 years old when the show aired. His grandma was his agent.
Oh, wow.
And before Alf, he played an orphan named Dash in several episodes of Punky Brewster.
Oh.
Which we also watched, right? That's another one. I was like, we watched that, right? Like, we talked about that show, right? Or did we only watch one episode?
I haven't watched Punky Brewster in a long time. So I don't think we.
Okay.
But you're right. But I feel like we've talked about it recently.
We've been doing this since 2018.
Y'all
we can't remember anymore what we did.
You guys need to remind us because we don't know.
Give us a call and you can leave a message and tell us whatever you want about the shows that we've already done.
My friend Melissa's going to listen to this and be mad that she can't call us in real time because she says she does. And I should have told her that,
Melissa.
Yeah. Melissa, when you listen to this,
call us. The number is down. Look down in the notes. The number is, I don't know what it is. It's down in there. So anyway, what was that? Oh, Benji enjoyed being on the Alf set. He was the only person who enjoyed being on the set of Alf.
Well, when you're a kid and you get to play with the Muppet, that's probably,
Right. He basically said it was like a big romper room. He could do whatever he wanted, running around the set whenever he wasn't needed for a scene. He's just hanging out.
Oh, yeah.
And his first role was as a baby on Fantasy Island. But then after Alf was done, he wasn't really interested in acting. He did some things every now and then, but he just didn't want to do it anymore. And in 2003, at the age of 25, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy.
Ooh.
And he was given a medical discharge in 2005 and then married his wife, Sarah, in 2006.
Very nice. I feel like there's maybe a few other things as a child actor. I feel like he
was in other
might
things.
Be in makes a few random appearances because he was definitely same thing. Like I would remembered, oh, that's the kid from Alf. But just thinking that I would have seen him in a few other things.
Then we have Liz Sheridan, who plays Raquel Achmanek. Is that how you say it?
Achmanek.
Yes. She's a character. She's in a lot of things. I couldn't tell you what she's in right now, but we see her in a lot of things. And you can't have a huge secret in a sitcom without having a neighbor who's nosy, like Bewitched.
Yes, Mrs. Kravitz.
She has to come over and almost find out all the time. And then John LaMotta plays her husband, Mr. Achmanek. I don't know what his first name is.
Trevor.
Okay. And the psychologist you mentioned, who's in 4 episodes, Larry, I don't know what his last name is. He's played by the lovable Bill Daly from the Bob Newhart show.
Yes,
and I Dream of Jeannie.
Yes. I couldn't remember until you just said that who the psychologist was. And I knew it was somebody else famous.
So I was like, oh my gosh, it's him. Did you know he was born in Des Moines, Iowa? Des Moines, Iowa.
I did not know that.
He was. He was.
Yeah.
You got anybody else?
Well, I was just going to say Anne, is it Mayara? Mayara plays Kate's mom. And she's famous because she's in a lot of other stuff from back in the day. And we already talked about Jim J. Bullock that's in, he kind of comes on later on when they're in need of, extra. And I think that might be when Jake kind of stopped appearing. So Jake came on because he was that was Josh Blake that we talked about. He came on, his dad was in jail or something. So he came to live with his aunt and uncle. And he finds out, and he was in love with Lynn too. That was his big thing. He was always like, hey, and she's like, she treated him like you're my annoying little brother kind of thing. There's a couple other guest appearances by Anne Ramsey. and
Oh.
she's in Goonies, of course.
Yeah, she was born
She was born in Omaha and is
Yeah.
buried at Forest Lawn Cemetery,
Right,
which I
that's
did
where we
not
live.
know. So yeah, she tries to steal this dog that they found or something along those lines. It was like this whole deal or whatever. So she's in that. And another one is David Ogden Stiers plays a bum. And he discovers Alf and
Mhm.
tries to call it in to like the government.
Mhm.
And then it turns into, and then I can't even remember why, but he either befriends him or they kind of convince him not to. And it turns into like a feel good thing, of course. And then he was like, so then when the guys show up to look for Alf, he plays like he's crazy. So that he's like, yes. And then I did that, because he's like, he doesn't want them to know that in the very first episode, I believe, because this is what happens to me on the very first thing I write down. Mr. Heckles is a burglar that breaks in and Alf threatens him. But that also reminded me of one of my favorite things that Alf does is he hisses a little bit when he's trying to like get his way. So again, he acts like a human, but when they would do certain things, all of a sudden he'd be like, and I just would die laughing too, because it was like his way to physically intimidate, and he'd growl sometimes, and they were just like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Oh, you're so scary.
But he was great. So it's a great show to watch. I'm glad you agreed to finally watch it because again, it's from my childhood, so you definitely remember things differently, but I remembered a lot of it, so I was glad we got to watch it. Then I just had it on in the background because it's kind of one of those,
It's easy to watch when you're doing other things.
Yeah.
The final episode was a cliffhanger.
Yes.
Because it was not supposed to be the final episode. NBC's agreement for the 5th season was never put into writing. It was just like a verbal agreement. And so then in the end, they decided they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to go ahead with it. And so here's a huge spoiler. If you don't want to know about the final episode of Alf, which aired many years ago,
stop listening
don't
now,
listen,
because we're going to tell you.
Or skip ahead. In the final scene, the Tanners drive Alf out to the middle of nowhere. Okay, first of all, I watched the last episode after I did all the research. So then they're driving in the car and they're just like all mad. And I'm just like, oh, that's like their true feelings. They're like driving like, I hate this puppet. So they're driving him out to the middle of nowhere so he can be taken home by a spaceship. And it's a tender moment.
It really is.
And it's all sad, and he has to leave his Earth family, but he also finally gets to go with his people, and he's waiting there all ready to be beamed up or whatever it is they do. And the Air Force guys come and get him.
Yes.
And people, I was watching the final scene on YouTube, and people in the comments were so angry.
Yeah.
They were like, they were children, and they cried their eyes out. And then it was just evil.
Yeah. I didn't get, like, I did not remember how it was going to end or whatever. So of course I'm getting to this last episode and I was like, okay, this is interesting. So then, he gets like on the little radio, he finds out that a spaceship's going to be near this area and this is his only chance. So he kind of hemmed and hawed and he's like, well, I'm going to go. And it was like super sad. I mean, he'd been living with them for 4 years. They thought he was really going to be with them forever, I think. So when they drive out there and then what the government, like the Air Force, like found out, saw that coming, I think, or whatever. And then somebody finds out there's going to be some kind of meetup. And then, they show up and the Tanners like back away from him. They always did everything they could to protect him in most situations. And he's standing there and then they're like, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, let's like see what happens. And then at the end. And then at the end, he's standing there by himself. They're all closing in on him. And then it just freezes. And then it's over. The end of the series.
That's it.
Yeah. I was like, wait, what?
Right.
So then, I got no closure. And I think there was supposed to be something later that they were going to do. Like,
there was in 1996, there was an ABC TV movie called Project Alf. And so they picked up where the cliffhanger left off, where he had been captured by the Air Force guys. And it went from there. it did not include the Tanner family because I guess right after he was snatched by the Air Force, they moved to Iceland.
That doesn't even make any sense. Okay.
Yeah. So that happened.
Interesting.
6 years later. 6 years later,
6
they
years
they
later.
resolved this
Yeah.
sad cliffhanger.
Yeah. That was
And
just disappointing. But
yeah,
I was like, what?
people were mad.
Yeah.
Can't even imagine.
I mean, how?
That's like if at the end of Friends,
Right.
Rachel just moves to France.
Right. Yeah, that would have been if they ended it like at the halfway through part or whatever, and it'd be like she leaves. Oh, okay. Well, what do you guys want to do? I'm like,
Right?
all right.
Without Rachel.
Yeah.
Within France.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, no, 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 no. So yeah, that was. I mean, it was very sad because seemed like it was going to be very like you thought it was going to be a real series finale.
Yeah,
Like
that you
they
were
were
gonna
they
get
were saying
closure.
goodbye. I was crying. I was like, oh, this
Yeah.
is so sad. And they were going to go out there, and I just thought for sure this spaceship's going to land. They're going to pick him up. The end.
You're gonna see other Alf.
Nope. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Nope. Didn't get any of that.
Nope. It's horrible.
And I'm like, dang it. Can I go back to 1990 and try to shake somebody? Because what the heck?
Oh yeah.
That's
how it
crazy.
ended.
Yeah. Just disappointing. Yeah. So
Oh well.
loved Elf, but yeah, that part, not so much. Not so much.
Well, they didn't know. They didn't know it was the end.
That's
but
true.
It was the end. Yeah, I liked it. It was funny. I laughed. And I see why everyone loved it so much.
Yeah.
And why my friend talked about it like every week at school.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see Alpha this week? I did
Exactly.
not. I was watching Newhart like a normal 12-year-old.
And it's like especially as a kid. I mean, yeah, I was very young when this was on. So yeah, it is very kid friendly. Because
Mhm.
you got a Muppet. So you're like, I'm gonna watch this. This is really cool. And again, it was
and family
funny.
friendly. You
Yeah.
can watch it with your
Yeah.
parents.
Exactly.
It's only inappropriate if you know it.
True.
All right. Well, before we go, do you want to play a little bit of 80s and 90s trivia?
Oh my gosh, yes.
A long time ago, I bought these 80s and 90s trivia cards for Natalie's birthday that I kept because that's what I do. And so we each draw a card from the 80s pile and the 90s pile, and we ask each other a question. And you can answer at home. You can just scream it into the ether if you want to.
Yeah, one of these days we'll have our own radio show,
We
and you
totally
can
should.
call in.
And you can call in and answer our questions. All right, you want to go first with the 80s?
I'll go first. Oh, this is an interesting one that you'll probably get, maybe.
Okay.
Which U.S. city was the sitcom Family Matters based in?
Oh, geez. I feel I absolutely should know this.
I know now that I said you might get it. I don't think I would have if I hadn't looked right at it. I don't know if I would.
I feel like it was like Detroit or Minneapolis. Am I so wrong?
Right area of the country.
St. Paul?
Nope, but another big city.
Chicago.
Yes.
God.
Yes.
Why did I go like just wild?
But you're right. That's exactly kind of what I thought. I was like, it's not L.A. and New York.
It's I knew it was Midwest. I knew it was like centralized.
Yep. Chicago.
I can't believe I missed it.
Yep.
You know,
I always get ones that I don't know. Like you always,
you're not gonna get this.
Okay.
This doesn't even make sense. This isn't even a good one. Which show name can be abbreviated to MMPR?
Hold on. MMPR.
MMPR.
This is the 90s.
This is the 90s. It's a show. I can give you hints if you want. I don't think it's gonna help.
So this is probably not something I watched.
I don't think you did.
Medicine. No. Mr. Mrs. Melrose.
Melrose Place. Really?
MMPR.
MMPR.
Give me a hint. Try to give me.
It's a kids show.
Oh, okay. But no, that's Hannah Montana. No, yeah, you're right. I have no idea. Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. Public relations. They wear very brightly colorful suits and they fight aliens or something. I don't know. It's Mighty Morphing Power Rangers.
Oh man.
Yeah. You didn't watch that.
I didn't watch that, but
Yeah,
that would
that's
have,
right.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers or something.
Morphin Power.
Oh, I never know if we put these in the very bottom, so
That's
I give
fine.
you that card back. Okay.
I think my brother watched Power Rangers.
Yes.
I think we're too old for Power Rangers.
You're right. That's weird. Okay.
Okay, your turn.
Oh, I think you'll get this one. Where will you find the characters Gary and Squidward?
This is the 90s. I guess it was the 90s. That's SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you're correct.
I forgot it started in the 90s, but yeah, you're right. It was
I
late
didn't
90s.
know that either. I was like, what?
Oh, Gary and Squidward. Okay, my turn. 80s. What were the nicknames of the Miami Vice lead characters, James Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs?
Isn't it just Crockett and Tubbs? Oh my gosh.
Well, those are their actual names.
But
But they had nicknames as well.
man,
They had nicknames. They were like,
I feel like Sunny is one of them, but that's probably not right.
correct. That is
Oh,
correct.
it is Sunny.
Yes.
And
James Crockett and Ricardo Tubbs.
Sunny and Ricky?
Rico.
Sunny and Rico. Okay.
Thank you for playing this edition of 80s and 90s trivia.
80s and 90s trivia.
Come back for more in the future to be determined. Okay, well, should we wrap up this episode of Alf?
Yes, let's wrap it up.
Let's sing the theme song. Oh, no, wait, let's not. Okay.